Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten thinks Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And a beautiful Monday morning here in Portland. It's bizarre walking into the studio today, walking into work. The sun looked like, you know, a harvest moon. I mean, it was just this big red ball hanging, you know, a couple inches above the horizon, or a couple degrees above the horizon. And it's because of all the forest fires. You know, California's getting all this publicity about their forest fires, but Oregon is on fire too, as is Washington State, as is British Columbia, as is much of Canada, as is much of the American West. And, you know, and now Nature just came out with a report on this, how this is happening all over the world. So anyhow, we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about today. I want to start off with the question, should Democrats be talking about impeachment? And will Trump be impeached or will he resign? And for that matter, if he's impeached, will he leave office? In our second hour, we're going to ask the question, is it time to reclaim the word socialism? And James Robbins is going to be with us. He wants to save Confederate monuments. This should be an interesting conversation in our second hour. And, you know, so we've got a lot to talk about. I've got a new book. I've been working on this book for a while now. And I just yesterday sent off to the publisher what I think is the final first draft of the book. You know, I need to get editorial feedback back from the publisher, but we're planning on publishing this book in the spring. And we need your help coming up with a title for it. The book is about the history of gun violence, or history of the use of guns in the United States, starting out with the Native American genocide and then the use of guns to enforce slavery via the slave patrols, and you know, just basically you know, guns as an intrinsic part of American history. And then, you know, it gets into this whole issue of, you know, why we have this bizarre gun culture and how it all works and what do we do with it and all, you know, and how do we change it? What are the solutions? And, you know, if you've listened to my program a lot, you already know basically what I'm suggesting as solutions, but we need your help coming up with a title. The title, you know, our working title so far has been Shot Dead, the Hidden History of Guns in the United States, or Gun Violence, or the Gun Culture. But we've got a survey, a SurveyMonkey survey, where you can vote on what you think would be the best title and subtitle. And you can even come up with something that's not on our list. And there's links to that. There should be a link on our homepage. There is a link on our, we have tweeted out a link, so on the Thom _Hartmann Twitter feed, and on Facebook. So check it out and start voting what you think should be the name of Tom's next book and my next book. So it's, I'm very excited. This is a really good book. When I submitted it to the publisher, one of the big cheeses at the publishing house read the book and called me up and said, wow, I learned stuff I didn't even know, and I thought I knew all about this topic. So anyhow, it's the SurveyMonkey link over on Twitter, Facebook, and on our homepage at thomhartmann.com. Should Democrats be talking about impeachment? This is I think, frankly, a very, very important question. And, at a certain level, we have in our party, in the Democratic Party, a fair amount of denial going on, right? Oh, it's not so bad, or, oh, it is terrible, but you can't just talk about that. If you run on impeachment, that's just going to get the Republicans out there voting against you, is one theory. I've never been a big fan of the voting against theory, although Trump is causing me to slightly recalibrate my thinking on it. But broadly speaking, I think people tend to go to the polls because they want to vote for something rather than against it. Even when it's a polar opposite, you could say, well, people didn't vote for Mike Dukakis because, he wouldn't say that he wanted to execute the guy who, in the theoretical question, the hypothetical question, would you want to execute a man who raped and murdered your wife, Kitty? And he was like, well, I don't know. I'd have to think about that, in words to that effect, sort of thing. And some people say it cost him in the election. Well, I would say it wasn't that they voted, and just to talk about that one issue, right? Because there was a whole bunch of things, and the big one, of course, was the Willie Horton ad. Be scared of black people because Michael Dukakis wants to let them out and let them go, come kill you, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that was really the undercurrent in that election in 1988. But I don't think that a lot of people turned out and voted against Dukakis. I think that to the extent that the death penalty was an issue for them, they were voting for Bush because he was in favor of it. And Dukakis, whether he'd been opposed to it or whether he had simply been, really quiet about it, I don't think it would have mattered a whole great deal. So, but, this is a debate. This is a really serious debate that's going on inside the Democratic Party right now. You've got Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer have weighed in on it or are weighing in on it. And, the Democrats are, broadly speaking, the Democratic position, the party position is, we don't have control of the House. We don't have control of the Senate. We don't have, the 2/3 of the Senate necessary to convict. So, you'd have a Bill Clinton, Andrew Johnson situation where you might impeach him in the House, but nothing happens in the Senate. So why even bother? And we don't control the House. So, right now, Paul Ryan wouldn't even allow a vote on it. Although there's a very good chance Democrats will control the House after this election in November. And so in January, after January 20th, when everybody is sworn in, should we start talking about impeachment? And, what I've been saying up to this point is let's wait for the Mueller inquiry to come out. And I think it's going to get real interesting with Paul Manafort's second trial, because everything that I'm reading about this, and again, we haven't seen the public document dump and all that kind of stuff, and that won't happen until the trial actually starts. But everything that we have heard so far suggests that Manafort's second trial is going to be about his work with Russian oligarchs and in Ukraine and Ukrainian oligarchs and their links to the Trump campaign. So, if they get this conviction here, this second trial is going to be fascinating. And so there is an argument to be made that we should simply wait until the Mueller investigation comes in and we can all look at what happened. But I think that there's more than enough evidence right now. Actually, there have been several cases of this, but when Al Gore's campaign was given a copy of the debate notes for George W. Bush, they called the FBI. They said, we're not even going to open the book. We're not even going to look at it. Now, truth be told, they thought maybe they were being punked, and it was phony debate notes, or it was debate notes that would cause them to change their strategy in a way that would hurt them. Or maybe it was the real thing, and it was just exactly what they needed to win the election, but they weren't willing to cheat. And that was, by the way, from a source in Texas. It wasn't from a source in Russia. So, and this isn't the first time it happened, by the way. We know that Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, enthusiastically took Jimmy Carter's debate notes. But there was another Democrat, I think it might have been Bill Clinton, who got a set of debate notes and also called the FBI. This has happened twice. And so maybe it's just Democrats who have, basically high moral standards. But taking debate notes from a foreign government, and I think you'd be hard-pressed not to know that that was what was going on, given the email chain. I realize Giuliani's out there lying about this, but, given that, I think that it's pretty important to say, no, we don't want this stuff. So should the Democrats be talking about impeachment? And if so, how? Maybe that's the most important question. Should be, because I think that the topic is a big topic. I think that it really cracks open the larger issue of corruption and the larger issue of collusion, the larger issue of conspiracy to defraud the United States and frankly, to defraud all of us. We had an election, stolen from us. Now, there's a whole bunch of different things that happened. You had a weak candidate. You had Jim Comey coming out 2 weeks before the election and talking about Hillary's emails. I mean, all this stuff, any one of these things could have provided the margin of victory or not. You had voter suppression, but you also had a foreign government interfering.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls after this. It's 16 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. And let's see here, Mike watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Mike, thanks for in Altoona, Florida. Hey, thanks, Mike. Hey, Mike, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up, Mike? On Hybrid One. There we go. I'm sorry, Mike, start over. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a small step, but it's a step. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bomb stocks and all that. We don't need machine guns. Anyway, for those of us who are depressed, go down and vote, please. That's what I'll say.
Okay, well said, Mike. Thanks a lot for the call.
All right,
great to hear from you. I appreciate it. JP in Marietta, Georgia. Hey, JP, thanks for watching us on YouTube. Your thoughts?
Hey, yes, sir. I was wondering, either I've been kind of living in a little bit of a fantasy world and hoping that one day Robert Mueller will come out with both indictments and or articles of impeachment for, anywhere from Jim Jordan to Giuliani to Paul Ryan, who, heard before the campaign, we heard him saying, to keep that one conversation quiet about Trump being owned by the Russians. And basically anybody that has, pretty much known that Trump is in their pocket and has tried to derail the investigation by jumping on.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that Trump is the problem that we have with Donald Trump is that I don't think it's so much that he's owned by the Russian government, although there may be a role there to play, particularly because Putin apparently mixes oligarchy and governance together, but that he's certainly owned by the Russian mob. And this is the thing that I think is going to probably come out in Manafort's second trial. And a large part of it, I think, has come out in the first trial, is the extent to which organized crime and billionaires in that part of the world, and it's not just Russia, it's all the Stan country, many of the former Soviet Union satellite states, that corruption is just rampant, particularly corruption around fossil fuels, around oil, and it's just a matter of time before Well, back to Trump, that after his multiple bankruptcies, he desperately needed cash, and where did he get that? He got it from Russian oligarchs. I mean, you got one of his buildings is 25% apartments owned by Russians that are constantly being churned. You could take a $1 or $2 million apartment or condo and flip it 5 or 6 times in the course of a year and make $1 million profit once, make $1 million loss the next time, profit, loss, back and forth and back and forth. And every single time you do that, you're just laundering more money. So we'll see when this comes out. JP, thanks for the call. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann Program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And wow, lots of calls. Lots of people want to talk about this stuff. I am glad to see it. Chris in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Chris, thanks for listening to X-Ray FM. What's up?
Tom, Paul Krugman wrote a really great piece, and you might cover it later in the show just over the weekend, on how a lot of mainstream Republicans aren't vociferously denouncing Trump enough. And, him, and I've kind of posited this as well, and do we have any incidences in history where it's happened? Would Republicans talk about, like, freedom and less government? Do you think deep down, like in their core convictions, would they forego, to quote, democracy and freedom if the autocrat of their choice was for lower taxes and was a Christian, white, male, and was like a tough guy? Do you think deep down in their hearts they would resign themselves to autocracy if it was their guy? I think that's true of about 20% of the electorate. Perhaps as many as 40% of Republicans. The this authoritarianism, and thank you for the call. John Dean wrote a book called Conservatives Without Conscience. And it was based on this extraordinary research on authoritarianism that was published. Actually, there's a whole series of these studies published between the 1950s and the 1980s, where they looked at the authoritarian mindset. And, yes, you have there are authoritarian leaders out there. And, the classic fascists, obviously we all know who they are. But there are also authoritarian followers. There are people who are authoritarians, and in their own homes, they typically are authoritarian leaders. That is, they embrace the strong father model of both a family and a country.
whereas most of us embrace the nurturing family model. That's about 80% of us embrace the nurturing family model, which is basically the governing philosophy of the Democratic Party. We're all in this together. We're a nurturing family. We're helping each other out, all that kind of thing. Whereas the strong father model is, you know, everybody bows down to the father, you know, the strong father, the tyrant, as it were, or the autocrat, knows what's best, right? Father knows best. And if 20% of the population is essentially wired for autocracy, and that's the number that keeps popping up, and that's John Dean talks about that, then the political party that mostly embraces autocracy is going, you know, most of those people, that 20% of people, are going to migrate to that party. And if the Republican Party represents about a third of America, but they've got all that 40% of America that are authoritarians, I mean, it's conceivable that 100% of the Republican Party could embrace authoritarianism. But I think that probably it's 40, 50%, about half of Republicans, you know, all at the end of the day would be real happy if Donald Trump simply became a dictator. And he's certainly moving in that direction, and they're not sneezing. They're not concerned about it. Fox News is all down with it. Everybody's all in favor of it. So, you know, anyhow, impeachment. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind?
Hey, not too much, Tom. Bear with me. I'm in the smoke as well, and it's really messing up my allergies. But no, I don't think Democrats really should talk a whole lot about impeachment. I'll tell you why. There's a theory I've been working on for a while in America called, I call it inimical binarism, or a binary that's inappropriate. And just one example of it is like the reaction to Bo Bergdahl. I mean, think about it. We put Bo Bergdahl on trial for a crime of misbehavior before the enemy that carries a death sentence. And I even know some liberals that were like, okay with that. I mean, the truth is in the middle, all right? I mean, you know, if you're a captive of the Taliban for 10 years and then you come home and you face a trial that carries a death sentence, I mean, that's pretty severe. And, you know, with Trump, I think if we talk too much about impeachment, it's going to come off as a political device, a political, you know, just a political ploy. When in fact, you know,
But Dave, impeachment is
law and order.
Impeachment is a political, you know, it's a political solution that was built into the Constitution because there's no legal solution built into the Constitution to hold a president accountable outside of the courts, which, you know, Andrew Jackson demonstrated twice. He ignored the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but I don't, you know, if it looks like a cheap ploy, as some sort of just, you know, political game, the swamp, as they say. I heard a Trump supporter this weekend claim that that John Brennan voted for communists in the past. I mean, I've met John Brennan. There's absolutely no fact.
Well, you know, John Brennan oversaw torture. John Brennan, you know, oversaw rendition. He's not, you know, pure as the driven snow or whatever. He's not. Yeah, he's speaking out against Trump, and there's a certain amount of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But you know, let's keep this in context. So you think we shouldn't talk about impeachment yet?
No, I think we should talk about, you know, everyone's subject to the law.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. It's 27 minutes past the hour. Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the 2 murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War. The other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out, brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was quote, calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell. Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. Help us title my newest book. I've got a book coming out in the spring. It's about gun violence and the history of gun violence in the United States, where it came from, what can we do about it. And we tweeted about, 30 minutes ago. You can find it on my Twitter feed. We tweeted a link to a SurveyMonkey survey so that you can offer your suggestions for titles. And it's also on our Facebook link, and it's also on our homepage. So check it out. In the meantime, we're asking the question, should the Democratic Party be talking about impeachment? Richard in Chicago. Hey, Richard, thanks for listening to Chicago's Progressive Talk. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, first, I was just going to start off, The Arming of America. I imagine you read that as for your book.
I don't think I did.
Oh, that was the one they went after because the author couldn't produce the estates. You know, he looked at the states to see the listing. They listed everything, right? Mm-hmm. And he said there weren't many guns. So they tried to hook him on that. But it was such a small point of it. You know, he had the letters from Washington about militias and newspaper articles for 50 years about how silly they were. And it's an excellent book.
Cool.
I only got up to about the 1830s, and I, for some reason, stopped reading it. But it's a good one. But the reason I called was about it's so interesting that the Republicans can go lock them up, do all this sort of stuff, and we're debating. It's a good debate whether or not we should go after impeachment or talk about impeachment. And
right.
I think it's a teachable moment. It's legal. If we ought to couch it in the terms of if real crimes were perpetrated, would the Republicans impeach him? I mean, it's a great thing for mobilizing our base. And
if Bill Clinton, if there was even a whisper in 1992 that Bill Clinton had conspired with Russia to get himself elected, and that they had actually actively helped him get elected, he would have been impeached in a nanosecond.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Is they're bloodthirsty, and we're having a debate like we're remember the cartoon with the chipmunks? Excuse me. No, excuse me. I mean, it's a legitimate thing, and we shouldn't go overboard on it, but we should use it to explain that these Republicans won't even investigate it. They won't fund cyber monies for cyber protections. It's a gift. So I hopefully will do it, but do it in a way that doesn't isn't easily dismissed.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to it, Richard, and I think you've nailed it there, and that is that when we talk about impeachment, we always need in the same sentence to mention an actual crime, the conspiracy to collude with a foreign country. That's a crime in and of itself. I mean, whether any collusion actually happened, conspiring to commit a crime is a crime. And it looks to me like the actual conspiracy was executed, that they did collude, and then they engaged in a cover-up. So excellent point, Rich. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we have to show some toughness. No one's going to follow Democrats if they continue to be meek.
Yeah,
they're not. This other side is rabid.
I agree. We need to take names and kick ass. I'm totally with you. Thank you, Richard. Good to hear from you. Brent in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Brent, what's up?
Hey, Tom. So I tend to think that we likely should not, unless, barring we get some relatively heavy support from his supporters. So if the people who voted for him find out the Mueller investigation comes out and they turn against him, then absolutely. But as long as they stick with him, I don't think that we should, because I think that it sets a pretty horrible precedent. And I do think that it divides the nation further. They will say, "See, we got our guy, and you got rid of him," and it just sets up nasty politics for a long time. I know you said 20% of people like authoritarianism, and I'm sure there's some great research in that area to come up with that number. But it would seem to me that the number should be radically higher, because mammals are generally tribal with an alpha male at the lead.
Well, actually, in a lot of species, it's an alpha female. You know, wolves being probably the most famous example. But yeah, I get what you're saying, Brent. I think that if you look at the difference between the Nixon impeachment, which didn't happen because he resigned, but it was in process. 4 articles of impeachment were filed in the House of Representatives, and they were going to a vote the day that he resigned. And versus the Clinton impeachment, where Clinton didn't resign and he suffered through the process. I think that the reason why even Republicans turned on Nixon was that the vast majority of Americans were of the opinion that he had committed impeachable crimes. And now you've got a situation where if it weren't for Fox News and right-wing hate radio, I think we would be there right now. I think America would be horrified. But Fox News has been throwing so much chum in the water, so much distraction, so much denial. They are so selective in their coverage. They don't cover the things that look bad for Trump. They do cover, and then they cover these wacky conspiracy theories to get everybody all bent out of shape and whatnot. That at least the Republican Party, which mostly uses Fox and right-wing hate radio as its go-to source for what they think is news, you know, they don't yet know what has happened, you know, what this guy has done. So the question, I guess the debate becomes, you know, are we, you know, much like Ken Starr and Bill Clinton, are we just, you know, because Bill Clinton, his popularity with Democrats radically increased during the time of his impeachment. Are we simply helping Trump by talking about impeachment? Or is there, or, you know, in the case of Clinton, I think, you know, the people who said no just thought that, you know, a BJ was not worth impeaching somebody over. It was something that had probably happened with the vast majority of presidents, some, you know, similar circumstances. But on the other hand, with Nixon, what we saw was that if you can demonstrate that there's an actual crime there, the people will get into place. And the problem with the Fox News viewers is that they are not informed. They don't know what the actual issues are. Fox News does a really good job of keeping them in the dark. And so,
don't you think the best taught lesson is a self-taught lesson? Perhaps it might hurt the whole country, but if he turns the economy really to the south in a drastic way that hurts their voters, maybe they'll listen.
Yeah, well, I think that's already starting to happen. Excellent point, Brent. Brent, thank you for the call. Sam in Houston, Texas. Hey, Sam, what's up? Sam in Houston, Texas? Okay, Shira, Sam is on line 6. You can see what's going on with Sam. Let's try Anita in San Antonio, Texas. Texas to Texas. Hey, Anita.
Texas. Hey, Tom. Good morning. I mean, good afternoon. Yeah, I don't think we have to talk about impeachment. I don't think we have to run on impeachment. We just need to run on holding him accountable. This is the most corrupt administration probably in American history. The Republicans are not holding him accountable. We have to run on holding him accountable. I think the American people would want that.
But isn't the ultimate statement of accountability an impeachment?
Well, eventually, but people just say accountable instead of impeachment. I think the word impeachment, you know, just saying that before accountable suggests that we're going to listen to the evidence. We're going to hold him accountable for not just Russia, but for the emoluments clause, for all the corrupt things that his administration is doing. And I believe even his supporters kind of want him to have some checks on him. Because really they voted for him because he's a racist and he uses a bullhorn instead of a dog whistle.
I think a good chunk of his base voted for him for that reason, but I think that the people, and it's a sizable cohort of the population, by the way, who voted twice for Obama and then voted for Trump, voted for Obama because they wanted hope and change, and they voted for Trump because they wanted hope and change. He promised that he wasn't going to mess with Social Security and Medicare. He was going to bring our jobs back home and change our trade policies. I mean, this is pretty straightforward.
I don't believe that. I don't believe it because I believe there was a study, and I can't remember, it was Yahoo or something did a study that showed the people that voted for Obama and then voted for Trump were almost like contrarians, where they were voting for whoever they felt would upset the system. That's my point. By upset the system, I'm talking about he was going to change. He campaigned on blowing up neoliberalism. He said he was going to raise taxes on rich people. He was going to change our trade policies. He was going to have he was going to have medical help. You know, he was going to have a program that was better and cheaper than Obamacare that covered all Americans. I mean, these are the things he campaigned on. But it was so ridiculous. If these people were paying any.
But low information voters, Anita, bought it.
No, I don't believe they cared about the social.
I know people who did. I sat and talked with these people.
I'm sure there's a small percentage of people that might have. But I'm telling you here, I have met many Trump supporters. I've not met one that didn't vote for him because of some sort of racial overtones in his.
I wonder if that's the difference between Texas and Washington, D.C., because all the people I was meeting were, at the marina in Washington, D.C. And
I think if you dug a little deeper with them, even you might say, well, how do you feel about affirmative action? Do you feel that white people are discriminated against? And I guarantee you'll find some.
Yeah, although a lot of them were in the military, where that's less of an issue. But okay, I get what you're saying, Nita, and I don't want to debate you on it. I think that probably we're both right at some level. Thank you so much, and I appreciate the call. Marta in Big Bear Lake, California. Hey, Marta, what's up?
Tom, I am once again so impressed with how your program connects the dots, and I agree that we should talk about impeachment, but if we want to win and do the right thing, remember that Obama and FDR won by uniting Americans across racial and ethnic lines. Maybe you can agree or disagree. I think you would probably agree, but feel free to debate me or whatever.
Well, it's not a debate. I think, in the case of FDR, that was a time when very few black people in America could vote. We still were operating under Jim Crow, but yeah, FDR, maybe it was Harry Truman who integrated the Army, but whatever. Yeah.
He talked about economic issues, and so I would say issues that these are modern times. We have new ways of looking at things, but some of the issues that we can unite Americans on are issues that affect us all: economic, trade, the Walmart economy, environmental devastation, and that's global warming, but also air quality and poor water quality.
Got it. Marta, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Very well said. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Sean in McKinney, Texas. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I was just calling because the last few days I've been wanting to call, but I haven't been able to because of work. But on Thursday, you were talking about President John Adams a lot in relation to Trump. And you said that he was like a mini dictator.
Yep.
And I just wanted to call and disagree with you vehemently on that point. I mean, yeah, he did sign the Alien and Sedition Act.
He didn't just sign it; he campaigned for it, and he threw Benjamin Franklin Bach in jail the day before the law even came into effect. His own party rejected him based on this. His vice president, Thomas Jefferson, left town and literally for the rest of the presidency would not meet with John Adams or talk with John Adams. I mean that, and he threw 34 newspaper publishers in prison. How is that not dictatorial?
But that's not true.
That is true.
What happened was he first of all, the Federalist Congress was pushing him to sign. He was reluctant to sign that bill.
Not true. Not true. His wife Abigail was one of the principal advocates of it, and in fact, John Adams had a thing, and I encourage you to Google this. You'll find, it should be easy to find. John Adams had a thing where whenever he came into a town, the local militia had to come out and give him a cannon salute, and everybody had to shout, "God, long live President Adams," or no, "God bless President Adams." And there was a guy named Luther Baldwin who was sitting in a bar in Trenton, New Jersey, in 1790, late 1798, maybe it was early 1799, and Adams and Abigail came through, and Luther Burbank said, they're shooting the cannons because President Adams is coming through. They can shoot him in the arse for all I care. And the bartender, the bar owner, was a Federalist, and he called the police. And Luther Burbank spent the next year in prison under the Alien and Sedition Act because he said that about John Adams. And this was something that I mean, Abigail was all over this. She did not, and the thing that offended him when Benjamin Franklin Bach published his op-ed in the Aurora was that Bach called him old, querulous, toothless, and balding. These are not the behaviors of a man who believes in democracy.
No, you're right. I mean, you're right that Abigail Adams did push for it. She was trying to persuade her husband. But even then, okay, I mean, the way I look at it is like this. That is one bad thing that President Adams did. He did a lot of good things. The majority of the things that he did were good. I mean, if we look at it from that point of view, we can look at it, well, Franklin Roosevelt in turn.
What are the good things he did as president?
Well, first of all, he went ahead and he kept us out of war with Spain and France because he was trying to sign a peace treaty with France because of the Quasi-War. And, Vice President Thomas Jefferson went to the French ambassador and was trying to get him to stall those peace talks, where they wouldn't even talk to the emissaries that President Adams sent over there. He stopped a war with Spain, because Alexander Hamilton wanted to take the land from Spain, which was going to cause the war. They were being backed by Venezuela. Adams said, no, I'm not even going to meet with the ambassador from Venezuela. Actually, he went ahead and when they were trying to execute people because of the Pride Rebellion, President Adams said, no, absolutely not.
Okay, Sean, just a quick question, Sean. We're just changing our board here. Can you hear that music in the background?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Sean, I got to run. Thank you for the call. Okay, John Adams did some good stuff. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann Program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. There we go. Now I can hear myself. Tony, watching Free Speech TV in Chatworth, California. Tony, you're on the air. What's up?
Well, I just I came across your program on TV just now, and I'm listening to your callers, and it really scares me that the lack of intelligence on everybody that's calling it. Not saying I'm brilliant. I'm 74 years old, and I've been around the block, but just one big point. Everybody has an opinion, but the ultimate answer is the stock market. And right now the stock market is on the breaking out and making a brand new high. It's been up over 7,000 points since Mr. Trump has been elected.
No, it's not.
And don't get me wrong.
It's up a couple thousand points since Trump was elected. But, Tony, you give me a $1.5 trillion credit card, I can show you living large.
Wait. It was 18,000. It's at 25. And so it's 7,000 points. And you guys are...
Again, I'll say, Tony, you give me a $1.5 trillion credit card, I can show you what it looks like to live large. This is a bubble, Tony.
Oh,
And beyond that, why is the stock market any metric of anything? Only fewer than 40% of Americans own stock, and 80% of stock is owned by the top 7% of Americans.
Yeah, well, it's still, opinions are often wrong, but the stock market is never wrong, and I don't believe that.
So if the stock market crashes, then you're going to turn on Trump, Tony?
Pardon me?
If the stock market crashes, you're going to turn on Trump?
No, because I'm just...
Okay, so it's not the stock market.
First of all, it's not going to crash.
But if it did...
Too many economic... And don't pull that debt thing, because Obama is the one that doubled this trillion-dollar debt.
By doing what?
Responsible Democrats.
Obama doubled the debt, Tony, by putting George Bush's wars, which were not on the debt, they were just on the credit card, into the budget.
You're just making up stories.
No, I'm serious, Tony. You can find this. You know, there's no shortage of sources for this. When Trump came into office, he had a balanced budget. Bill Clinton left a balanced budget in 2000. I'm sorry, Bush. When Bush came into office, he had a balanced budget. Bush did a massive tax cut that threw us into it. There's a multi-trillion-dollar deficit as a result of Bush's tax cut. Then we had another $4 trillion added because of 2 illegal wars that Bush lied us into. Obama inherited that stuff and decided to put it on the budget, so that, to be honest about accounting. And you're saying Obama raised? Tell me, what did Obama spend money on that raised the deficit? I just gave you $6 trillion that Bush put on raised the deficit. What did Obama do?
Well, he gave over $1 billion to the Iranians under the table.
$1 billion is nothing. We're talking $1 trillion.
To the Hamas.
A and B, Tony, he didn't give Iran anything. That was Iran's money that was frozen in U.S. banks that we had no claim to.
Yeah, why? Let me ask you another question, Mr. Hartmann. Where do you think this market, and where do you think economically, politically, we would be if Hillary Clinton would have won?
That's not the point right now, Tony.
No,
the point. No, it's not. The question is, has Donald Trump committed crimes worthy of impeachment? You and I are debating whether he's mismanaging the economy, but I'm asking the question, has he committed crimes worthy of impeachment? And I'm telling you, when a campaign says to a foreign government, yes, I love it, give me intelligence on my opponent, that campaign is so corrupt, it does not deserve to govern our nation.
You know what? He couldn't be corrupt because what has he got? He's got people in there, just regular people. Do you think?
You know what? Wilbur Ross, he says he's worth $5 billion. He's a regular person. Betsy DeVos with 10 mega yachts is a regular person. You know, come on, give me a break, Tony. The swamp is stinking with people that Trump has put into office. Go back and look at Forbes magazine, the profile that they just did of Wilbur Ross, our commerce secretary, the guy who went to Saudi Arabia and said, gee, it's amazing, there's not a single sign, you know, protesting the government. Well, that's because they execute you if there are. But Wilbur Ross claimed he was worth $5 billion. It turns out he's worth $800 million. And Forbes magazine said the guy's a grifter. You've got, you know, Betsy DeVos, who doesn't know what she's doing except that she wants to destroy public education in the United States. I don't see why you are down with destroying public education, Tony. Or is it because, you know, public education is available to poor people and people of color?
Oh, stop with the poor people. Stop with it. You know what? Public education is a farce. It's a farce.
It has been since Reagan started defunding it, yeah. In fact, let me just play for you. This is going to be on the 360, right?
See, you're talking
let me just, Tony. This is. You remember Bill Bennett?
Yeah, but let's talk
Bill Bennett was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Education, and
you're pulling out all the mistakes of everyone in the past.
Yeah, I am. Here's what Bill Bennett had to say.
But I do know that it's true that if you wanted to reduce crime, you could, if that were your sole purpose, you could abort every black baby in this country and your crime rate would go down.
That was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Education. Brilliant. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. Today we're reading from The Quantum Revelation by Paul Levy. This is from the introduction. For the last few years, all I've wanted to do is read about quantum physics. I've been studying quantum physics on and off for decades, but I've never gone as far down the rabbit hole as I have this time. It feels like I've gone through the looking glass to the point of no return. The more I contemplate what quantum physics is telling us, the more my mind gets blown into phantasmal traces of non-existent subatomic particles. Studying quantum theory is like ingesting a mind-altering time-release psychedelic that keeps coming on with a greater intensity the more I wrap my mind around what this world-changing revolutionary theory is telling us about the nature of reality. Taking in what quantum physics is revealing to us about our universe is psycho-activating beyond belief, in that it activates the psyche, inspires the imagination, and synchronistically dissolves the boundary between mind and matter. To say that quantum physics is the greatest scientific discovery of all time is no exaggeration. Its profound revelations and implications cannot be overstated. We literally have to create a new form of language, not to mention a new way to think, to do it justice. In discovering the quantum, physics has indisputably encountered consciousness. There is simply no denying this fact. The highly respected mathematical physicist John von Neumann said as early as 1932 that consciousness exists in and has entered the equations of quantum mechanics, yet no one knows exactly where to find it. Quantum theory demands a radical revisioning of the role that consciousness plays in the deep structure and ongoing unfolding of reality. Quantum physics unequivocally points out that the study of the universe and the study of consciousness are inseparably linked, and that ultimate progress in the one will be impossible without progress in the other. The change that began with the discovery of the quantum reality wasn't solely a transformation of the worldview of science, but is potentially an expression of and vehicle for the evolutionary mutation of human consciousness itself. To create context for its discovery, at the beginning of the 20th century, the prevailing opinion among many physicists was that there was nothing new to be discovered in physics except for more precise measurements. A unique development in human history, the discovery of the quantum nature of our universe, has brought about a seismic, tectonic shift in the very foundation of physics and the roots of our scientific worldview. The change in the concept of reality emerging in quantum theory is not simply a continuation of the past, but rather a radical break with it. The gap between the new version of reality, the quantum reality reveals, and our old habitual ways of thinking about reality are wider than the abyss of the Grand Canyon, the two sides of which are at least on the same level. With the emergence of quantum physics, we are encountering an entirely new universe that is of a totally different order than the one we've been used to. Quantum physics heralds a change so momentous that it can, and already has, transformed the course of world history. The discovery of the quantum has inaugurated what Niels Bohr conceived of as the beginning of a new epoch. This great change is already underway, and yet there remains a long way to go for the full transformational impact of the discoveries of quantum physics to be assimilated by humanity, i.e., for its insights to transform the nature of the collective common sense of human beings. All great theories spend a long time gestating and being born. It can be dangerous to understand new things too quickly. We find ourselves in the role of midwives, helping to birth a quantum understanding of the world. What quantum physics is revealing to us is so radical, with implications so far-reaching, that to call it merely revolutionary would not do it justice. The conceptual revolution of quantum theory has literally turned physics on its head. What it is revealing about our universe is turning right side up what had been inverted and upside down regarding our understanding of the nature of reality. The advent of quantum physics can be thought of as a revolution in the realm of ideas. Quantum physics is introducing us to a radically new way of seeing, conceptualizing, and understanding that profoundly impacts human thinking, feeling, sensing, knowing, and being. As if the universe itself were giving us a cosmic physics lesson, what quantum physics is revealing to us requires a completely new way of picturing and thinking about the universe, our place in it, and as well as who we are. Quantum theory is teaching us that implicit in our very thinking are certain flaws and misperceptions that, unseen and taken for granted, unnecessarily constrain and limit our ability to apprehend the nature of nature, including our own. The founders of quantum physics, sometimes referred to as genius physicists, people like Max Planck, Albert Einstein, Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, Wolfgang Pauli, and Erwin Schrödinger, famously argued that quantum physics is first and foremost a new way of thinking. Indeed, the most far-reaching impact of that uniquely 20th century mode of thought, quantum physics, will be found within the human mind. The discoveries of quantum physics require a novel response in us, which, when are more fully understood and integrated, will irrevocably change us, both individually and as a species, in the very core of our being. Regarding the implications of quantum physics, John Bell, one of the most important physicists of the latter half of the 20th century, is of the opinion that, quote, the new way of seeing things will involve an imaginative leap that will astonish us, end of quote. The book, The Quantum Revelation, by Paul Levy.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Here with you, David Horowitz says of this new book, Erasing America, Losing Our Future by Destroying Our Past. James Robbins has written a richly informed book about the campaign to demonize America by erasing and then rewriting its history. This is a totalitarian agenda, and Americans who love their country should arm themselves with Robbins' book. On the line with us is James S. Robin, the author of Erasing America, Losing Our Future by Destroying Our Past. James, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I should add that I don't see a website for you. Your Twitter handle is @James_Robbins, just like mine is Thom_Hartmann. So, James, why do you want to memorialize traitors who fought to preserve slavery and took arms against America and killed 600,000 people? I mean, white supremacist Tim McVeigh also took up arms against America. Do you want a monument to him?
Oh, well, certainly not. I think a proper monument to him was the video of him being executed. I think that was just perfect for him.
Then why Robert E. Lee?
Why Robert E. Lee? Well,
Robert E. Lee killed a lot more Americans than Tim McVeigh.
Did he now? Well, you know, he thought that he was defending his country.
No, he didn't.
And,
he separated from his country.
Robert E. Lee didn't think he was defending his country?
No, he did not. He separated from his country. When you secede from the United States, you are not defending the United States. You are committing treason. He's a traitor.
Well, he was defending Virginia. That was his point of view.
Virginia is not the United States.
Well, but I'm telling you what his point of view.
So you think that? So you think that somebody who
against the premise that he was defending his country, but that's what he thought.
He did not think he was defending his country. You're right. He thought he was defending Virginia, or at least that part of Virginia that wanted to maintain slavery. But you know, I don't understand what it is about treason that is so seductive to you guys.
Oh, well, is it really what I'm talking about? I'm not really talking about the Civil War, because this starts with the Civil War. It starts with Confederate monuments, and then pretty soon people want to take down George Washington, Thomas Jefferson.
Actually, those Confederate monuments were not put up during the Civil War. Most of those Confederate monuments were put up after The Birth of a Nation came out in 1915, in this massive revival of the Klan across the South.
Oh, most of those a lot of those monuments were put up even before that. I mean, we can quibble.
Yeah, there were two periods. There was one in the 1880s. And there was, if you take a look at all the monuments across the United States to the Civil War generals, what you find is that about 80% of them were put up in two 10-year periods, one in the 1880s and the other in the late teens and the early 1920s. And in both cases, they followed a revival of the Ku Klux Klan, and they followed attempts to intimidate black people from voting.
Well, that's one theory.
No, it's supported by the evidence.
That's an interesting theory. Monuments were put up in North and South. They were put up by a variety of reasons, by a variety of people. The ones in the South were put up by Democrats. Democrats are now taking
Democrats were the party of slavery until 1965. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, Democrats.
But the Democratic Party today has nothing to do with that.
Taking them down.
The Democratic Party today has nothing to do with that, James. Maybe you weren't alive in the 60s or haven't read that history, but the Democratic Party repudiated slavery and racism in the 1960s. The Republicans then stepped in to embrace it with something Richard Nixon called the Southern Strategy.
It's great that the Democrats caught up to the Republican Party, the traditional anti-slavery party. It's great that it took them 100 years to catch up.
I think you were talking over me when I said, and then the Republican Party, with Richard Nixon's Southern Strategy in 1968, 3 years after the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, stepped in to pick up that Southern racist vote.
Oh, that's really funny. I mean, it was Jimmy Carter who restored citizenship to Jefferson Davis. So whatever.
What does that have to do with anything?
What it has to do with is that people on the left want to bring back the Civil War. They want to refight the Civil War, and they want to use it as a tool of intimidation.
No, I would say if you want to do these blanket kind of indictments, the people on the left want to say
the Civil War is over and it's not worth relitigating. And this whole thing about Civil War monuments is just an attempt. It's the thin end of a wedge to question the entire basis of American history, the entire legacy of freedom of the United States. It extends to Jefferson, it extends to Washington, it extends to anybody that the left doesn't like.
Okay, so why? Let's move along here. Why do you think black football players should be prevented from kneeling to protest police violence against black men? They're public figures too.
I think that they should do their job, which is to play a game of sports. They are entertainers, and they should focus more on that. Their protest really has no place against the national anthem, and that the people are responding to this by tuning out the NFL in droves, which is a proper free choice to do.
So you want to suppress the right of African Americans to protest the murder of African Americans by police in the United States?
No, the NFL players can do all they want except during game time. In game time, they should focus on the game. They're employees of the league, and they should focus on that. If they want to use the millions and millions of dollars that they earn to start programs to help inner-city communities...
So are you joining me in calling for the NFL to stop the whole phony patriotism thing?
Taking a knee is cheap, my friend.
James,
nothing.
James,
it hurts the league.
We have limited time here. Filibustering does not help. Are you going to join me in calling for the NFL? This whole thing with the Pledge of Allegiance and everything. Prior to, I think it was 2005, 2008, whatever year it was, the Army was desperately trying to recruit because, George W. Bush broke the military with 2 illegal wars. And so they paid the NFL tens of millions of dollars to do this whole, we're going to play the national anthem, we're going to, salute the flag, and we're going to have military flyovers, and they're going to pass out recruiting literature in the stadiums at the end of the game. And this happened for, a half a dozen years or so, and then the military stopped paying for it. When the military stopped paying for it, shouldn't we have stopped doing it? I mean, why do we want to militarize and nationalize a sporting event?
My friend, national anthems and flag ceremonies and things have been going on at football games since the 1950s. So the fact that the Defense Department
not in the NFL
some things and recruiting things.
No, this began when the NFL started taking money from the Pentagon.
Check your history. No, it did not. It's all in my book. It's easy to look up. You can go on YouTube and find videos of games from the 50s where they're playing the national anthem, and rules for players to show respect to the flag during the national anthem started in 1963.
Okay. All right. In that case, then you think that those rules are what we should be following and we should be imposing on these players. Tough luck, Charlie. So they're trying to shoot you. You can't do anything about it.
Well, if the players want to show respect for the flag, I think that they should. There shouldn't have to be rules for that. They should show a little respect for their country during their, $1 million entertainment venues. And if they don't, then I think the NFL should fire them.
Okay, I guess we have a difference of opinion here. You say in your book that we are dissing Christopher Columbus's memory. I have a bit of a problem with that. I mean, Christopher Columbus started the first international sex trade operation. He wrote to the King of England or of Spain. He said 100 Castellanos are as easily, Spanish coin, are as easily obtained for a woman as a farm. And it's very general that there are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 years old are now in most demand. He gave a young Taino woman to his number 2 guy, Mr. Miguel Cueno, who said, quote, Columbus gave me my own sex slave, a beautiful young girl who resisted with all her strength, leaving me no choice but to thrash her mercilessly and rape her. This is the guy that you think we should be celebrating?
The purpose of honoring Columbus, in addition to honoring the heritage of Italian Americans, which is one of the reasons why this
I think a lot of Italian Americans are embarrassed by this.
Oh, well, a lot of them are, but a lot of them also think that Columbus was somebody worth honoring and that Italy is something worth honoring.
What's worth honoring? A guy who's a fortune hunter, who kills people and rapes people.
Well, people want to hunt fortunes. Well, what business is it of yours?
Well, that's my point. I mean, what business of it is our nation's in celebrating a guy who, bumbled into this continent and then proceeded to murder people? I mean, he killed a couple of million Indians, the Tainos, in what's now Haiti and Dominican Republic. And, I mean, it literally wiped them out. It reached the point, this is, again, Cueno, the guy who was his number 2 guy on the boat. He said that as a result of the suffering and hard labor they have endured, the Indians choose and have chosen suicide. Occasionally, 100 have committed mass suicide. The women, exhausted by labor, have shunned conception and childbirth. Many, when pregnant, have taken something to abort and have aborted. Others have delivered. After delivery, have killed their children with their own hands so as not to leave them in such oppressive slavery. This is what we're supposed to be celebrating, James?
With Columbus, what we celebrate are the consequences of his voyage, the discovery of the New World, and everything. The
Vikings discovered the New World 500 years earlier.
Well, they didn't do much with it, but Columbus discovered it and did much with it. He's the guy who opened up the New World to the later waves of European exploration and exploitation from that, the United States and then South America.
So I'm assuming then you also celebrate the largest genocide in the history of the world.
The most consequential human migration in history.
So I'm assuming then that you're celebrating the largest genocide in the history of the world.
And freedom.
So I'm assuming, James, that you're celebrating the largest genocide in the history of the world. We killed somewhere between 40 and 100 million Native Americans on this continent over a 300, 400-year period. That's what you're celebrating?
Well, that was an unintended consequence of a lot of it. I mean, that had
unintended?
To do with the transmission of disease. No, most of that was from disease, but that was
a lot of it was.
And don't go into this whole, smallpox blankets nonsense.
Well, it's not nonsense. It actually happened in Ohio, but that's not my point. I mean, Manifest Destiny, Jefferson opened up the West and directed the Army to go out and kill Indians. You denying that?
He directed the Army to go kill Indians. That was his order, go kill Indians. That was his op order.
Clear the lands. I mean, what's the difference?
Well,
okay, the book is Erasing America by James S. Robbins.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can tweet him at James_Robbins. Thanks, James. We'll be back. And welcome back. Tony in Cleveland, Ohio. Hey, Tony, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi, Tom. What I really wanted to talk about, first of all, there's some comedian that was saying that Russia was racist, but Russia had Pushkin, who they idolized, and he was half black. His father was a slave. But really, the thing I really wanted to talk to you about was, why are we not asking the Republicans, are we a satellite of Russia yet?
Okay. That's a good question.
That's what they're pushing us to be.
Are we a satellite of Russia? Well, to the extent that Russia is not a small d democracy, but more of a small a autocracy, I think Donald Trump and the Republican Party certainly have been moving us in that direction. I mean, just blowing up the norms of normal governance. For example, refusing to allow President Obama to have his own nominee for the Supreme Court. I mean, that is pretty nuts. For example, I mean, just basically violating the rule of law and ignoring the Constitution. I'm pretty horrified by it. Tony, thanks. That's a good question. Are we a satellite of Russia yet? I don't think so, but, we'll see. George in Santee, California. Hey, George, what's up?
Yeah, good morning, Tom. On the subject of fake news, when I'm talking to my Trump-supporting friends, they like to say that what we call mainstream media or corporate media is liberal media.
Right.
And for me, that is an example of fake news, that is put out there knowing that it's a lie, that our corporate media is not fake news, but it's put out there to sway people's political and social opinions. Could you give me a good, simple definition of what fake news is?
Well, fake news is lies.
Yes, and I think the idea that the mainstream media is liberal is a very good example of fake news.
Yeah, I don't disagree. First of all, facts have a liberal bias. The vast majority of Americans actually like the Social Security, Medicare. I think fairly soon you're going to see the vast majority of Americans wanting Medicare for all. Certainly the majority of Democrats do. The global warming is real. I mean, I don't know when that became a liberal thing. I guess what I think is happening here, George, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What is happening here, George, is that the definitions are being redefined. Conservative, my dad's version of conservative was, yes, we want progressive change, we want to move forward, but we do so slowly and incrementally so as not to destabilize society. You can't have too rapid a change or you'll get backlash and then society goes nuts. That was what conservatives believed. William F. Buckley said the modern-day conservative stands athwart the arc of history with his arm out, with his hand out, yelling, stop. Right? That was it. But today's conservatives are not that at all. Today's conservatives are corporatists. They want to do whatever is in the interests of the very rich and the big corporations. Period. Full stop. And they're willing to use racism to get there. They're willing to use sexism to get there. They're willing to use misogyny to get there. They're willing to use pretty much any awful thing to these so-called conservatives to get there. It's pretty amazing. George, thanks for the call. I agree. The liberal media is this show, but that's it. We'll be back. Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann Program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who, pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A lot of people still want to talk about the whole impeachment thing, and I'm down with that. Frank in Spokane. Hey, Frank, what's on your mind?
All righty, about this...
Yeah, you're on the air, Frank. Don't listen to your radio.
I realize that. And this impeaching, I'm not for it. The thing that worries me is Pence. Pence knows how to, how to work all of this.
Yeah, he's one very slimy character, and he's a total toady for the Koch brothers.
Oh, you know this, I know this. However, let Mueller run his course and get moderate Democrats in office, as opposed to coming in with an attitude of we must impeach this man.
Yeah. What is what? Okay, I get it, Frank, and your point is well taken, and there's a lot of Democrats who agree with you. What is a moderate Democrat, though? Can you give me some examples of policy differences between moderate Democrats and liberal Democrats?
Lisa Brown up here,
right?
And she's running against Kathy McMorris Rogers,
right?
And it's really curious. You're close enough. Kathy McMorris Rogers is running these terrible ads, and Lisa Brown is running positive ads. Now, I'm a veteran. I didn't have heel spurs. I enlisted when I was 17 in the Army, and fortunately, and this was in 1971. I was sent overseas, but I've been going to the VA, and they're farming it out. I don't like that. They're trying to privatize the VA.
Yeah, they've already privatized pieces of it. But my question, Frank, was what is it that makes Lisa a moderate Democrat versus a progressive Democrat? I don't understand this.
In my opinion, progressive would come in with an attitude of, we have to impeach.
What does that have to do with progressivism?
Pardon me?
I don't see where impeachment has anything to do with being progressive on things like thinking that we should have a stronger Social Security system rather than privatize it, thinking that we should have a stronger public education system rather than privatize it, thinking that we should have Medicare for all rather than Obamacare, or just going back to the system that we had before Obamacare.
Everybody should have what I have.
Then you're not a moderate Democrat. If you're talking about the VA, which is socialized medicine.
Yes, that's what I think. Everybody should have that.
Okay, then you're not see, it seems to me that moderate Democrat means a Democrat willing to get into bed with corporations.
Pardon me?
I said it seems to me that our definition of moderate Democrat, at least the definition that people like Chuck Todd use and Stephanie Ruhle use over on MSNBC, is a Democrat who's willing to take money from corporations and rich people and who will vote in the interests of corporations and rich people. Am I missing something here?
What I am saying, I served this country. I feel that those I served for should have exactly what I have, is the VA.
Right. I agree. Medicare for all would be one step short of that.
Medicare for all.
Yeah, well, Medicare for all is not even the VA. I mean, the VA, your doctor actually works for the government. With Medicare for all, your doctor is still in private practice.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
Now, fact of the matter is, if we don't put moderates in, if someone comes in with an attitude of, oh, let's impeach, we're taking our eye off the ball.
Okay, so your definition of moderate means not willing to talk about impeachment.
No, because...
Okay. Frank, I'm sorry. I'm out of time. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Ralph Nader's most recent book, Breaking Through Power. It's Easier Than We Think. This is from the first chapter. It's titled Plutocracy of Maximums, Democracy of Minimums. When I was a student at Princeton University, I learned from my anthropology studies the concentration of power in the hands of a few is common to all cultures, societies, nations, tribes, cities, towns, and villages. Even where the thirst for self-governance and democracy is strong, as was the case in New England towns before the American Revolution against King George III, wealthy Tories were there too. In central and western Massachusetts, the farmers used the term the river gods to describe the rich merchants using the Connecticut River as a possible profitable trading route. These days, most people protesting for economic justice use the term the 1% to describe the ultra-small group of people who wield enormous influence over our society today. There is something about the differences in skill, determination, lineage, avarice, and pure luck that stratifies most people from the rulers who dominate them. In the political realm, the few become dominant because they hoard wealth and are driven to exercise power over others. When a small group rules a society, the political system is considered an oligarchy. And when only money and wealth determine how a society is controlled, the political system is a plutocracy. From the standpoint of a democratic society, both oligarchy and plutocracy are inherently unjust and corrupt. Of course, there are variations in the degrees of authoritarianism and cruelty that each system exercises over the communities it relies on for workers and wealth. Scholars have resorted to using phrases like benign dictatorship or wise rules or paternalistic hierarchies to describe lighter touches by those few who impose their rule over the many. Thomas Paine simply called them tyrannies. People, families, and communities can only take so much abuse before they rise up to resist. The job of the rulers is always to find that line and provide the lowest level of pay, security, housing, consumer protection, healthcare, and political access for society so that they can extract and hoard the greatest amount of wealth, power, and immunity from justice for themselves. In many ways, the majority of Americans live in a democracy of minimums, while the privileged few enjoy a plutocracy of maximums. This small volume is not just about the ravages of power or the assaults against disadvantaged and downtrodden communities. The subject here is the dominating influence of the 1% in business, politics, health, education, and society as a whole. Over the past 50 years, Americans have suffered the relentless commercialization of everyday life, their privacy and their childhoods, their parks and prisons, their public budgets and foreign policy, their schools and religious institutions, their elections and governments, and the most basic societal institutions of them all, the family. Consider all the family functions that have been outsourced to business. Eating, cleaning, childcare, counseling, therapy, entertainment, sports, lawn work, simple repairs have been increasingly commercialized, commodified, packaged, and marketed back to us as products of luxury and convenience. Even mother's breast milk has been displaced by infant formula. In a plutocracy, commercialism dominates far beyond the realm of economics and business. Everything is for sale, and money is power. But in an authentic democracy, there must be commercial-free zones where the power of human rights, citizenship, community, equality, and justice are free from the corrupting influence of money. Our elections and our governments should be such commercial-free zones. Our environment, air, and water should never fall under the control of corporations or private owners. Children should not be programmed by a huckstering economy where their vulnerable consciousness becomes the target of relentless corporate marketing and advertising. American history demonstrates that whenever commerce dominates all aspects of national life, a host of ills and atrocities have not just festered and spread, but become normal. Enslavement, land grabs, war, ethnic cleansing, serfdom, child labor, abusive working conditions, corrupt political systems, environmental contamination, and immunity from the law for the privileged few. History also shows that whenever there have been periods when enough of the country organizes and resists, we see movements of people and communities breaking through power. Progress is made, rights are won, education and literacy increase, oppression is diminished. It was in this manner that people of conscience abolished the living nightmare imposed by the laws and whips of white enslavers. The nation moved closer to promises of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness expressed in the Declaration of Independence. We won more control over our work, our food, our land, our air, and our water. Women secured the right to vote. Civil rights were elevated and enforced. Public schools, improved environments, workplace collective bargaining, and consumer protections did not spontaneously evolve. They were won by people demanding them and breaking through power. These moments of great progress are expressed in terms of new legislation, regulations, and judicial decisions that directly benefit life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The book, Breaking Through Power, by Ralph Nader. Breaking Through Power, it's easier than we think. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And just a reminder, I've got a new book coming out. I finished writing it a few weeks ago. It's about our tentative title, my favorite title, but you know, I would love your opinion on this, and I would love your opinion on this. My publisher has put together this survey. The tentative title that I've been working with is Shot Dead: The Hidden History of Guns in America. It's part of a series of books I'm writing. The next one is going to be on the Supreme Court. After that, I want to do one on neoliberalism. I want to do one on climate change. All of them will be like the hidden history of these things, or something like that. So we're asking for your help in titling them, and we tweeted out a link to the SurveyMonkey thing where you can fill it out. It's also on our Facebook page, and it's on our website at thomhartmann.com. So just an FYI. So people are calling in and weighing in on thoughts on whether or not we should be impeaching Trump, or talking whether Democrats should even run on impeachment, or whether we should just, you know, keep our mouths shut and wait for Mueller's report, or what. What do we do? Brian in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Brian, your thoughts?
Hello, Tom. So in my mind, as a matter of principle, Donald Trump definitely should be impeached. But the problem is, as a matter of politics, I'm not sure that's going to work out very well, because, to echo an earlier caller, you get rid of Trump and you end up with Pence.
But what could Pence possibly do that's worse than what Trump has done? I mean, Trump has tried to overthrow the tax exemption, or you know, the limit on tax exemption for churches. Trump has threatened to go to war with Turkey, essentially, over a right-wing religious pastor. Trump's got the evangelicals solidly behind him. He's been throwing them bones left and right. He's you know, trashed trans people in the military. I mean, you know, what possibly could Pence do that's more than Trump has done?
Well, but the thing is, if you get Pence, then you have a candidate that is much more serious in 2020, because
I'm not afraid of Mike Pence. I've debated Mike Pence. Mike Pence is a weasel. I think Mike Pence will melt under the public scrutiny if the media you know, takes him at all seriously.
Yeah, but Tom, in 2020, just follow my chain of reasoning here.
Right.
So, in 2020, if Trump is still in office and he's been checked by a Democratic House of Representatives at the least, and perhaps a majority in the Senate, so he's been rendered somewhat toothless. But so then he, you know, he's still in charge of the executive and performing all kinds of mischief. But if he is removed from office, you've got Pence there that already, you know, Republicans and independents, I just think they'll be much more likely to vote for him than they would be Trump in 2020.
Yeah, you may be right. You may well be right, Brian. And you know, that kind of discounts that we would have a strong candidate on the Democratic side, which I'm you know, I'm confident we're going to have a strong candidate, or a strong campaign, a candidate for both president and vice president in 2020. But your point is that it's unlikely that Trump will get removed from office anyway. You don't have 2/3 of the Senate, and even if you did, you probably wouldn't have a united Democratic Party around this issue for the reasons that you're talking about, that Pence would be a stronger candidate in 2020 than Trump. On the other hand, don't underestimate Trump's ability to either A, turn out his base, or B, possibly start a second American Civil War.
Yeah. I hear you, Tom. It's just...
I mean, there's a danger here, isn't there? Yeah.
It's just food for thought.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Thank you very much. I appreciate the call, Brian. Sheila in Talent, Oregon. You wanted to, I think, echo Brian's perspective?
No.
Okay.
My feeling, well, part of it. One, the question is, should the Democrats talk up impeachment? Should that be their focus?
Right.
I don't believe it should be the focus. I think that Mueller is going to get the goods on them, and if he does, it's not going to matter one bit if we don't take back Congress, if the Democrats don't take Congress in this next election. Which
You're right.
I wish people would stop calling them midterms. These are congressional elections,
yep.
and state legislate. They are as important. I'm getting angry from two of your other callers, but they are equally as important in this democracy as the presidency. We don't just have a king. We don't have a one ruler. We do have one who thinks he would be king. But so I would like their focus to be, when I heard Netroots Nation, I listened to Kevin De Leon, who I think is an excellent speaker and someone I thought, geez, this kid's going to go somewhere, to Ocasio-Cortez and to Julian Castro. And their focus was what we need, what the Democrats can bring to the table that the Republicans are not doing. They talk it, but they don't do it. I want them to talk about the infrastructure that is not getting funding. How many school buses in the U.S. have to plunge into the Ohio, the Missouri, the Mississippi, or the Columbia because the bridge was built in the 50s, like the one in Italy.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about. I'm angry. We need to talk about health care. I'm a retired critical care nurse. I know what happens when people don't have health care. I know that the consequences can be death, and it's not death of just senior citizens who, are pinching like I am starting to with their medication. We are seeing young people who don't have it. We are seeing people who have no access who said, well, I can't go see a doctor. I don't have the money. I have these other debts I have to take care of.
Yeah.
There's also, we need to talk about racism. It is hitting my family directly and personally. And racism is real, institutional racism. We need to talk about a criminal justice system that is freaking crazy. I'm tired of we give so much airtime to the wanker in the White House. Excuse, that is a swear word, so don't, but it's an English swear word that my mother was tossing around a few times.
And a bloody good one. Yes.
It is a bloody good one. And toss her too, and I won't go further than that because then they get really nasty. But we need to talk about what we can do. And one of the things that needs to be focused on is this tax bill that people think they got something good for it. It's going, as long as Republicans are in office, the middle class taxes will go up. So if the middle class care about whether they're going to send their kids to college, they need to realize that the Republicans are not going to help them.
Yeah.
So Sheila, I want them to talk about the increasing poverty in this country.
Sheila, I get it.
I'm done, and I probably won't too much now.
I absolutely get it. And you've got a good list of issues, and I agree. Democrats need to be running on the issues. That's not the question, though. The question is, should we also talk about impeachment? I think that we're capable of chewing gum and walking at the same time.
Absolutely. And when the question comes up, then everyone who's running should say, yes, I would vote for impeachment. Yes, this man needs to go.
Yeah.
And as far as Pence, we'll deal with Pence when he comes along. He may go with him. We don't know how much Pence knew.
I agree. Pence was in charge of the transition. I think it's entirely possible that you're going to find Pence is up to his eyeballs in this stuff. Sheila, thank you. Excellent perspective. I appreciate it. It's great to hear from you. Carolyn in Hamm, Texas. Am I saying that right, Carolyn?
Yes, you are.
What's up?
Well, I actually disagree. I don't think that we should be discussing impeachment of Trump for two reasons. One, there is not one shred of evidence that has been presented to the American people of any Russian collusion whatsoever.
Trump has admitted to it. He admitted to it in a tweet last week. He said that they had a meeting with Russian lawyers and Russian officials in Trump Tower in order to discuss getting from Russia information about Hillary Clinton.
No, that's not what he said. That lawyer was not a Russian official. She had at one time worked for the Russian government as a prosecutor, but she was in private practice.
Sheila, the email that they got, Carolyn, the email that they got, and you could read these. I mean, it's Donald Trump Jr. publicly put these things out. The email that they got said, the Russian government would like to help you.
Well, I mean,
that was the email from Algorov. I think it was Algorov, from the Russian oligarch who set the meeting up. He was like, the Russian government would like to help you. And Donald Trump Jr. is like, cool, bring it on.
An oligarch is not a member of the Russian government.
Well, how is Donald Trump Jr. to know that when the guy represents himself as a representative of the Russian government?
So it's not against the law to go and meet with them. It is against the law to actually say, okay, give me the evidence. But there was no evidence presented. It was about adoption, and so it was
okay, so it wasn't about adoption. It was about the Magnitsky Act, which is, you know, the Russians stopped American adoptions of Russian children in protest of the fact that their oligarchs were being financially hurt by the Magnitsky Act. And so, you know, that wasn't about adoptions. That was about, you know, loosening up the sanctions in exchange for helping Donald Trump become president. I don't see how that is not an impeachable crime.
There is no crime of talking to someone.
Conspiracy to defraud the United States is a crime.
There is no defraud. He didn't get any money from the government.
He got something of value. He got Hillary Clinton's emails.
Those were all, you know, he did not.
He did. Well, they were transported into the public domain via WikiLeaks from the Russians to WikiLeaks to the public domain.
There is no evidence to prove that.
At the request of Donald Trump.
No, there is no evidence to prove that. I mean, just because he said it at
Carolyn, he's confessed to it. And well, Carolyn, you need to go back and read the email chain between Don Jr. and the guys who brought this information. It is so obvious. Carolyn, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Talk Media News in about 4 minutes and find out what's going on in the world today. Stick around. And welcome back. Rocco in Rosendale, New York, listening to us on Progressive Voices. Hey, Rocco, what's up?
Well, you know, I don't think that impeachment goes far enough. It appears that the GOP has abandoned most of its core principles and become a racketeer, influenced, corrupt organization.
So you're calling for a RICO investigation and prosecution?
Yes.
I'm with that. I'm down with that. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Okay. You know, every day that goes by, they have a new crime against the American people that concentrates the wealth in the hand of oligarchs. The oligarchy pays them with donations that underpin their political careers. Without these donations, which are basically bribes, these predators would be out of a job. So, you know, and then they go on and they dismantle every cabinet office that's been appointed by this president. It's absurd. This is criminal on a massive scale, and it should be brought to the American people to understand that the entire GOP is guilty. Because if Trump knew, Pence knew. If Pence knew, McConnell knew. If McConnell knew, the Speaker of the House knew, and down and down and down the line.
I believe you're right. And I am hopeful that the Mueller investigation, if this is true, I mean, if it's not true, I would like these guys to be exonerated. But if it is true, then we need to lay the evidence before the American people and the world, and then, you know, an appropriate action will be taken. But should we be talking about that kind of a, well, actually, you're making a strong case not just for impeachment, but for actual prosecution. And but the oligarchy has been certified as acceptable by the Supreme Court. I mean, the Supreme Court arguably created the modern American oligarchy in 1976 in the Buckley versus Vallejo decision, when they said that it's illegal it's unconstitutional to pass laws that restrict campaign contributions.
Well, that's got to be changed.
Yeah, I think so, but it's not going to be changed now that you've got, you know, an illegitimate Trump presidency who is appointing 2 Supreme Court justices that should have been appointed by a Democratic president. You had the illegitimate Bush presidency, who appointed 2 Supreme Court justices that should have been appointed by a Democratic president. Hell, Ronald Reagan appointed 2, maybe 3 Supreme Court justices, and you know, he stole an election. It's like you know, we've got a big problem with our Supreme Court here.
It goes all the way back to Reagan. It goes all the way back to Reagan.
It seems like everything does.
Yep.
So, okay. Thank you very much for the call. It's so we should be prosecuting these guys rather than just impeaching Trump. So what are the crimes that we would prosecute them for? Look at what Scott Pruitt has done. You know, literally taking global warming off the website of the EPA when global warming represents an existential threat, not just to the United States, not just to our military power, not just to our economic power, not just to the health of our people, but to the survival of the human race. And we're going to take that up. Excuse me. This is just, you know, it's outrageous. It's beyond the pale. We'll be back. Bob Ney is going to be with us in just a moment with Talk Media News. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann Program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, you know, a couple times a year, and you know, that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who, you know, pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just, you know, click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. Bob is on the line with us. He's the author of Sideswiped, former Republican congressman from Ohio. Congressman, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Great to have you with us, Bob. So what's going on in the world today?
Have you talked yet about the lunch strategy with the 2 Trump attorneys at the BLT stake yet?
I know nothing about this.
Oh, you're going to love this one, okay? As we know, and I want to make a disclosure here, Don McGahn at one point in time did work for me with the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee for me and others, and also gave us advice during the campaign finance reform debate as a lawyer. So I just wanted to make sure I got that out there.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
So I know him. I've had dinner and lunch with him. Not in the last 3 years or 4, but before. And so the interest, obviously, with the Don McGahn story is fascinating. And we know now that he has spent 30 hours, when there's a lot of speculation, with Mueller, being questioned, of course, by the Mueller investigation team. Now, the reason he's been sitting down with him, because, by the way, Tom, he was completely opposed to opening up to Mueller in the beginning. Now, to McGahn's credit, excuse me, he did threaten to resign if, in fact, Trump carried out the threat to go through Sessions to fire Mueller. So he did do that. But he did not believe in an open strategy. The 2 lawyers that are no longer in the service with Trump, Dowd, I think John Dowd and Ty Cobb, those 2 lawyers, they're no longer employed. Those 2 lawyers had lunch at the BLT Steak, which, of course, is a popular D.C. steakhouse. And that was in a report from September 2017. During that lunch, what ended up happening is, this was the quote from the lunch, because there was a reporter that happened to be sitting at the next table.
Oh, that's right. I remember this now, yeah.
Right. Well, here's the quote. The White House counsel's office is being very conservative with this stuff, said Cobb. as he told Dowd. Our view is we're not hiding anything. Referring to Don McGahn, he said, quote, he's got a couple of documents locked in a safe. Then Cobb expressed concern about another White House lawyer and said, quote, I've got some reservations about one of them. I think he's a McGahn spy. So, of course, this got reported. So then Don McGahn and his lawyer, as we understand it from what we found out, William Burke, could not understand why President Trump was so willing to allow Don McGahn to speak, because they said to Don McGahn, you can go speak to Mueller.
Right.
So McGahn started to fear, according to reports in the White House, that he was being set up to take the fall. And, of course, one would think that because if the president's lawyers are sitting there talking about you at the BLT Steakhouse, openly at a table, one would think you're going to take a fall. So, therefore, McGahn has spoken. Now, is he going to the level of where, you know, he's exaggerating anything on the president? I highly doubt it.
Yeah.
Would he be telling the truth? You know, we're not in the room, so we assume. The only thing that is the follow-up to this, though, Tom, whatever McGahn says, unless Mueller can act on it, then it's incumbent upon Trump at some point in time to be deposed as the president. Then you see what McGahn said, and then you see what Trump said. So
Bob,
I think that leads...
So the conclusion of all this is what?
Well, so my conclusion of this is that Trump will never, ever, under any circumstances, sit down with Mueller, because they will look at whatever McGahn said, and they will ask Trump. And again, if he doesn't sit down with him, then what happens to him? Unless
here's let me lay out my theory on this, Bob, and I'd love you to reality check it.
Sure.
Donald Trump has a long history of lying to everybody in sight, including his own lawyers. And you see this in a number of depositions over the years that had to do with business matters, where his lawyers were blindsided when he finally got in and had to testify under oath and turned out and, you know, admitted that he had just openly lied even to his own lawyers about the issues. I'm thinking that Trump knew that that his son and other people in the campaign had reached out to Russian sources to try to get the dirt on Hillary. He did it himself in a speech, you know, famously, et cetera, et cetera. But he knew that there was collusion going on and, you know, conspiracy. And he lied to his own lawyers that in the very early days, the White House lawyers, the ones who were employees of the White House as opposed to employees of Trump, they came to him and they said, okay, is this true? And he said, no, of course not. You know, we were no collusion. You know, everything's good. And they were like, okay, well, we've got to come up with a strategy to deal with Bob Mueller. And Trump is like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. And so they're saying, okay, well, in that case, then we should just give him everything so that he'll figure out that you didn't do anything wrong. And that'll be the end of the investigation, right? And Trump is like, at that point, he's kind of backed into a corner by his own lie, and he says, oh yeah, sure, go ahead and do that. And so Don McGahn goes out and says, okay, here's everything I've got. And then as time passes, you discover, Don McGahn discovers that Trump has been lying to his own lawyers and lying to Don McGahn and you know, would have been lying to Mueller. And at that point, you know, Don McGahn starts going, whoa, I've got some liability here because I repeated those lies to Mueller early on, so I've got to go back and talk to him again. And that now McGahn is like, you know, whether Trump was setting him up to take the fall or not, he could see that he could take the fall. And so now Trump has been caught by his own lies. What do you think?
Well, I agree, because Trump didn't set McGahn up. What Trump did was set up Cobb and Dowd by telling him there was nothing to worry about, and then they indirectly set all this up. So Trump caused all of this.
Right. Yeah. By his being a pathological liar, essentially.
They believed him.
Yeah. There you go. Any lawyer who believes Donald Trump deserves what they get. Bob Ney, thank you so much, Bob.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who, pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership but never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatas, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is, that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new, end of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, it is this. We cannot be satisfied with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition, and instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and that this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy or to save them or to make the world with them is less important than the fact that he found them and he recognized in them the end of something and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world, excuse me. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the Oedipal land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now able to set sail for another place, a place that is neither the home he left nor the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some kind of demand is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggests that the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study, and it continues. It's
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So, is it time to reclaim the word socialism? Or maybe just to claim it? Because even Franklin Roosevelt was accused of being a socialist back in the day by the Republicans. And he rejected that. He said, no, I'm not a socialist. I'm an American. And this is the American way, and this is the American tradition, and this is the American, Social Security. We're all in this together. It was the nurturing family model of how a country should be run, as opposed to the severe father model. And, we're all in this together. We care about each other. We care for each other. It's our job collectively to be here for each other. Increasingly, though, that word, socialism, democratic socialism specifically, has been used now for the better part of 30, 40 years in Northern European countries. Certainly the Scandinavian countries embrace it with enthusiasm. Yes, I mean, Louise and I, we did this show for 2 weeks from Denmark back, 6, 7 years ago, some long time ago. And I had on, a bunch of Danish politicians, Danish news reporters, and everybody was like, yes, we're a democratic socialist country. We have social democracy, I think was the phrase that they used more often than not. And the idea was that, and almost half of the entire GDP of Denmark is in the government sector right now, because the government pays for all of your education all the way up to an MD, and they pay you, a couple $100 a month to get that education. In other words, to cover your room and board and your food and your books. They pay for your medical services. And it's quite comprehensive, and it's completely, it's totally comprehensive. They subsidize housing. They subsidize employment. They subsidize employers with, long-term unemployment benefits and other things like that. Now, we subsidize employers here in the United States with food stamps and with housing assistance to low-income people. But I think most Americans don't realize that that is a subsidy to low-wage employers. That people would not work at McDonald's and at Walmart and at 7-Eleven and at fill in the blank. They would not work those jobs if they did not have government support. If they couldn't get food stamps, if they couldn't get housing support, if they couldn't get, Medicaid, if they didn't qualify for cheap or free medical assistance, if they couldn't get those things, they literally could not afford to take those jobs. So these payments that we're providing to working poor people are not subsidies to the working poor, the way the Republican Party likes to characterize them. They're subsidies to the employers, because if those subsidies weren't there, the employers would be forced to offer higher wages because nobody would want to work for them. Because, I mean, why work for $7 an hour when you end up in the hole? So anyhow, I've kind of wandered far afield from my original topic, which is it time to reclaim the word socialism from the dirty word category? Elizabeth Brunig writing about this over at commondreams.org. She says 57% of Democrats polled said they view socialism positively. Only 47% of Democrats view capitalism positively. That's down from 56%. Republicans, 71% love capitalism, and only 16% of Republicans think that socialism is a good thing. But here's the thing, and this really troubles me. I saw this, I've seen this twice over the weekend, both times on MSNBC, but maybe it's just because I watched that more than I watched CNN. But in both cases, I heard commentators say that people like socialism more than capitalism, and and therefore, quack, quack, quack. And the problem is that democratic socialism is not anti-capitalistic at all. Democratic socialism envisions a massive role for capitalism in our economy. Basically, the private sector is left as the private sector. All democratic socialism advocates is that the commons, the public sector, should be robust, that it should be healthy, it should be strong, that your ability to get an education should be unquestioned. Your ability to get health care should be unquestioned. Your ability to retire at the end of your work life and live a dignified life to old age and death should be unquestioned. That the right of people to have a successful pregnancy and give birth without fear of death. Keep in mind, the United States has the highest maternal death rate in the developed world. Our maternal death rate is as bad as it is in some of the really underdeveloped and undeveloped parts of Southern Asia and Africa, and presumably parts of South America, although there's not a single country there that is as badly afflicted as in Asia and Africa. But this is not anti-capitalist. Democratic socialism coexists with capitalism. And just this breathtaking ignorance that I'm seeing on the part of mainstream and corporate media commentators saying that capitalism is inconsistent with democratic socialism, it just blows my mind. And I think that it further confuses things. People watch TV and they go, oh, well, you get to pick between socialism and capitalism? Well, yeah, if you want to use Marxist metrics, but, this is not, we're not talking about Marxist socialism. Karl Marx used the word socialism. He should have used the word communism, and later on he did. But democratic socialism is not communism. Yes, communism stands in opposition to capitalism, and capitalism stands in opposition to communism. I get that. I agree with that. But when Democrats are talking about socialism, we are not talking about communism. We're talking about what we already have. America is already a socialist nation. We just do it badly. We have Social Security, but most people actually can't retire on it. We have Medicare and Medicaid, but it doesn't cover all your expenses. It doesn't even cover getting your teeth cleaned. We have, a long-term unemployment, but the Republicans cut it from 2 years down to 1 year, and then they cut it from 1 year down to 6 months. We have job retraining programs, but they're pretty ineffective. They've been largely privatized, and they're being run by scam for-profit colleges. And Trump wants to put all that under Betsy DeVos's purview. So, yeah, we have socialism in the United States. We have food stamps, but, $3 a day, can you live on $3 a day? We just don't do it well. And the countries that do it well have lower maternal death rates, have lower rates of mental illness, have lower rates of death from all kinds of diseases, including heart disease and cancer, have lower rates of suicide, have lower rates of homicide, have less corruption in their body politic. And, you know, we're at the bottom on all of those things, on all the metrics for all those things. And I would argue that and by the way, the countries that do it well have less inequality as well. And we know that as inequality rises, so does crime, so does suicide, so does mental illness, so does teenage pregnancy, so does the rate of sexually transmitted diseases, so does drug addiction. All of these social ills have a almost one-to-one correlation between rising inequality and rising problems. And we have among the worst in the world. The UK and the United States are the worst because we had Reagan and they had Thatcher. And we both embraced neoliberalism with a gusto. And the consequence of that is, and you know, we used to solve this with high tax rates. That's how you, the way that you challenge unequal wealth distribution, wealth inequality, the way you challenge that is by raising taxes on very, very rich people and on high levels of income. It's real simple. It worked just fine. Before the Reagan tax cuts, the average CEO in America only made 20 times what his employees make. And it was usually his back then, too. Now, you've got CEOs that are making over 300, over 400, over 500 times what their workers are making. That's absurd. You don't have to pay CEOs that much to do the job. American business wasn't crippled or kneecapped or dysfunctional before the Reagan tax cuts. And then the Bush tax cuts, and now the Trump tax cuts. It's just straightforward stuff. If you want to have a country where that works, that has any measure of democratic socialism, and we have a lot of it, then make it work properly. Fully fund the Veterans Administration, fully fund Social Security, fully fund Medicare and Medicaid, fully fund food stamps. Yeah, you might have to raise taxes on rich people to make that happen. You might have to raise taxes on Wall Street to make that happen. That's a good thing. That reduces inequality and makes our society healthier.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So the question, is it time to reclaim the word socialism, or should we just go around it? Or is it time to reinvent the word socialism? Your calls after this. And welcome back. Zach in Hollywood watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Zach, what's on your mind today?
Morning, Tom. Just an observation. We all know and we all saw all the way through 15 and 16, the media, the corporate media was wall-to-wall Trump. We know that. And they were selling. And the point I'm trying to make is that we really do live in a market structure. We don't live in we live in a non-socialized market structure. And they're selling cars, hamburgers, and designer drugs all throughout 15 and 16, all along the way. And all the anchors were making bank on that. And now they're making bank, trying to come down on the right side of history, still selling cars, hamburgers, and designer drugs if we just look at what's going on. And I just would like to ask a question. What is the penalty for high treason? And has there ever been a conviction of high treason in this country?
Yeah, Benedict Arnold. I'm quite sure there have been others.
For high treason?
It runs a spectrum. I mean, at the high end, it's death by firing squad. But then,
that's what I always thought.
Benedict Arnold was banished from the country, as I recall. I'd have to go back and read the history. It's been probably 50 years since I did.
So he slipped out.
Yeah, but I guess the question is in what context. I mean, if you're the President of the United States, the penalty for high treason is impeachment.
So something changed along the way.
No, it's in the Constitution.
So that is the sentence?
Yeah, the idea was that the president is not subject, at least on a cursory level, to oversight by the courts individually. Now, we know now that that is not an absolute right. That was Nixon v. U.S. or U.S. v. Nixon, I guess was the case. And then we saw the same thing in Paula Jones versus Clinton. Those two cases, the Supreme Court ruled that the president was not above the law. So there is some law that can be inflicted upon the president. But generally speaking, at the founding of the Republic, and to this day, the idea is that if the president commits high crimes and misdemeanors, and by the way, the Constitution specifically says that in cases of impeachment and treason, the president cannot use his pardon powers.
And they're breaking constitutional law.
I agree, but that's, given our current system, that's up to the Supreme Court to decide. But the bottom line is that the solution to a president committing treason, or at least the primary solution, the first solution, is impeachment. Get the guy out of office. And then you can go after him as a private citizen. And I think a lot of us are looking at that going, yeah, that would be a good step. Just get this guy out of office.
Boy, it's going to be hard.
I agree. I agree.
These guys are so slippery.
Well, it's not just that. The main reason why Donald Trump has not sagged as badly as he could have under all of this is Fox News. Fox News is providing information to a significant portion of America. And those people...
I was a Bernie voter in the primary big time, and then I went and voted for Hillary, and we were up 13 points, remember?
Yeah.
13 points, and then the next morning, everything dropped out.
Yeah, it's, and that's unfortunately right now that's ancient history, Zach, but I'm with you. And, the question, what do we do with Donald Trump if it turns out that he has conspired to defraud the United States of a clean election by having a corrupted election, corrupted specifically in this case by the Russians? What do we do? I think we impeach him. We'll be back. Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann Program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Mac in Charleston, South Carolina. Hey, Mac, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, thank you for taking my call, and I'll be brief. My concern is about the voting system. I remember during the Vietnam War, I got drafted in '68. They should have set the voting system up like the selective service system. They had no problems finding us, dressing us up, and sending us into combat. If they set the voting system up like the selective service system in all 50 states, we wouldn't have this issue. When it comes time to vote, we would get a letter from the president that says, "Greetings from the President of the United States. It's time to vote."
I agree.
And
I completely agree, Mac. And we need to have
it's really not that complicated at all, because everybody in my hometown got drafted during the Vietnam War. And just as a matter of fact, I'm from a very small town, and we lost 10 soldiers in Vietnam.
Wow. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. The federal government does know who we are, and they know where we are, and they know how old we are, and
they can get their hands on us whenever they want.
The other thing, Mac, is why is it that in the last 2 years of high school, as part of the civics education, our high schools, given that we don't have this national registration process in place right now, why aren't high schools helping high school students go out and register to vote themselves?
How about that?
Yeah, I think just
conspiracy.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely is a conspiracy. This all came out of Jim Crow.
Absolutely. It's a conspiracy to defraud the person out of their ability to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said,
Well,
Mac. Thank you very much.
And I'll continue to support you guys.
Thank you, Mac. And thanks a lot for the call. Great to hear from you. Let's see here. David in Nantucket, Connecticut, or Naugatuck, Connecticut. Am I saying that right, David? Naugatuck. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't push the right button. David in Naugatuck, Connecticut. Am I saying your town right?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Cool. Great. Yeah, just fine.
There are a couple of things that I would like to say, and I think the religious right should look into this. There was a couple of decisions that were made by the Supreme Court involving the American flag. And what they said was that you don't have to pledge allegiance in the schoolroom, and you don't have to salute the American flag. There are several decisions on that.
Right. They also said you can burn the flag.
The Supreme Court decisions, you can actually relay it on your program. And another decision was on the American flag, the burning of it in Texas. And the thing is, Texas versus Johnson, 491 U.S. 397.
Yes, I agree. The Supreme Court has said that you can burn the flag as a matter of political expression. And
well, see, the reason you could do that, and I'll cite it to you because I got it right in front of me, and it's underlined. Hold on.
Well, what's your point, David? Why are you telling me this?
Well, my point is, you have the right to demonstrate, and this all involves with the right to demonstrate.
Right.
And if they cancel the right to demonstrate on any person, it's a violation of your First Amendment. And then
are you talking about the NFL football players?
The First Amendment goes to 4th, 5th, and 8th.
David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Are you talking about the NFL football players?
Well, yeah, it could relate to them, yes.
Well, but the government is not the agency that is restricting their.
Well, I understand that, but the government was subsidizing it, and as subsidizing it, they could control it.
Well, arguably, but they're no longer subsidizing it. So, but David, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's important information to know, all of these things. David, from David to David. This is David in Watchburg, Tennessee. Hey, David, what's up?
Oh, just sitting here watching you today, buddy.
Oh, thank you.
Good job.
What's up? So what's on your mind?
Oh, I was talking about the impeachment trial. I was like, I don't think I'm like the other guy. I don't believe that's really strong enough. And since Trump wants to put this country in reverse, they go back to public executions for him. Wouldn't be too bad, in my opinion. But
wait a minute, you're talking public execution for whom?
Trump.
Oh no, don't even go there. No, David, I'm going to stop this right now because you can't talk like that. I mean, you just can't. It's not only wrong, it's probably also illegal. So no. Mark in San Diego. Hey, Mark, we got a half a minute here. You got a quick point to make? No, Mark. Okay. Apparently not a quick point. And it's just not fair to put anybody else on with only 30 seconds. Let me just share with you this Vote Vets. Vote Vets is a great organization of veterans, and Donald Trump has blocked them on his Twitter feed. So anyhow, they just tweeted, remember your oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Think twice before following this man's order in a crisis. You might first consider throwing down your stars. Now, we're seeing over 100 intelligence officials coming out and saying, strip me of my security clearance. Go ahead, make my day. At what point does this spread from outside the intelligence community into the military? And people in the military start saying, okay, enough already. We'll be back with your calls and more of the news of the day right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's talk media for the sane among us. 27 and a half minutes past the hour. Back with your calls after this. reading from The Truth About Social Security. The founders' words refute revisionist history, zombie lies, and common misunderstandings by Nancy J. Altman. This is from Chapter 5, page 239. It's titled, In the Immortal Words of Yogi Berra. This is deja vu all over again. The last chapter ended with a call to expand Social Security, consistent with the founders' vision. Whether to increase or decrease Social Security's modest benefits, whether to add new protections or take current protections away, and whether to retain or change Social Security's fundamental structure are questions of values and collective choice. An overwhelming majority of Americans have always supported Social Security, valuing the basic security it provides by pooling risk. They understand that there are some undertakings that the government does better than the private sector. Security, both physical and economic, is one of them. To promote economic security in this world, and indeed around the world, government-sponsored insurance has proven to be extremely effective. Indeed, more than 170 countries have enacted their own version of Social Security. Americans appreciate that our Social Security system's benefits are earned and that work is a condition of their receipt. Indeed, the values that underlie Social Security are basic American values: reward for work, individual responsibility, shared participation, risk and benefit, responsible, prudent financing, and protection of our families. Those of us who want to see Social Security remain strong and see its modest but vital benefits expanded can triumph as long as we are engaged and informed. To win, we must be vigilant, hypersensitive to the goals and tactics that those who would like to see our Social Security system dismantled brick by brick. Though opponents' tactics have changed somewhat over time, their goal has been constant. This chapter will analyze in detail both the goals and tactics of opponents throughout Social Security's history, so supporters of Social Security are well informed and armed. A small minority has always believed that all but the neediest individuals should be completely on their own, and has long fought a campaign against Social Security. People holding those views want, as lobbyist Grover Norquist vividly remarked, to, quote, to shrink government to the size where we can drown it in the bathtub. Those who oppose Social Security have always been a tiny fraction of Americans, but they have an oversized influence because they are generally people of great wealth. President Eisenhower astutely explained in a November 8, 1954 letter he wrote to his brother just who these opponents of Social Security are and what he thought of them. Quote, should any political party attempt to abolish Social Security and unemployment insurance, you would not hear of that party again in our political history. There is a tiny splinter group, of course, that believes you can do these things. Among them are H.L. Hunt, you possibly know his background, and a few other Texas oil millionaires, and an occasional politician or businessman from other areas. Their number is negligible, and they are stupid. End of quote from Dwight Eisenhower, Republican Dwight Eisenhower. Some members of that tiny splinter group are libertarians who want to be free of all constraint. Others are wealthy individuals who don't believe they need to pool their risk because they are wealthy enough to self-insure, and they don't want the cost associated with a collective program of insurance. Still others are unenlightened business people who define their self-interest narrowly with no consideration for the common good and want to increase their profits and wealth by reducing the cost of mandatory contributions to government. And others are people who make their living from Wall Street and recognize that if people were not receiving Social Security, they would purchase more stocks, bonds, annuities, and other financial interests in the private market in an effort to protect their economic security. What unites all of these opponents is the desire to undo universal government-sponsored insurance in the form of Social Security and Medicare. People who share these views sought to defeat Social Security when it was first proposed, when that proved unsuccessful to change its basic structure and function as described below. The history of Social Security shows a continuous chain of opposition, but with different actors over time, of course. Interestingly, in some cases, the most prominent opponents over time have been related. The progeny of some of the wealthy opponents in the 1930s are still fighting Social Security today. The grandfather of President George W. Bush, who sought to radically transform Social Security in 2005, was a man named Prescott Bush, a contemporary of President Roosevelt. He once remarked of Roosevelt, quote, the only man I truly hated lies buried in Hyde Park, end quote. Similarly, the father of one of the highly ideological Koch brothers, Charles and David, who have financed efforts aimed at dismantling Social Security, was a Texas newspaper publisher who used that position to rail against Social Security and other New Deal programs. Opponents and supporters have not fallen neatly into political party affiliation. Among the electorate, Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike have always supported Social Security because they've understood how important it is to their economic security and to our nation. In addition, once Social Security was established, some Republican leaders like President Eisenhower have supported the program, at least in limited foundational size. In recent years, though, the Republican Party has endorsed proposals to dismantle Social Security, despite the claim made by virtually all Republican politicians that they support it. Moreover, as the mistaken view of Social Security as a drain on the federal budget and economy gained traction in the last few decades, some Democratic leaders have, perhaps unwittingly, pushed for changes that would undermine and weaken Social Security's protection as well. Nevertheless, though not all Democrats have supported Social Security, nor all Republicans opposed it, support for Social Security over its history has largely come from Democrats, opposition from Republicans. The truth about Social Security. Welcome back. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. And James in San Diego. Hey, James, what's up?
Hi. So, you know, I've been a Republican my whole life. I'm sad to admit I voted for Hillary this time because I did not like Trump. I live right by Tijuana. Most of my friends are Mexican, and I didn't like a lot of the, not necessarily what he said, but what he said brought people out that felt empowered to spew their racist crap and all that. So I voted for Hillary. The problem is now we've been a couple years or whatever, and I don't see him spewing that stuff anymore. And the problem is deciding who to vote. Well, deciding who to vote for next time. I've got 4 kids to feed. My 401k is higher than it's ever been, and I got a raise at work, and I'm getting more in my check than I've ever gotten. So tell me why I shouldn't vote for him.
Well, you must be a high-income white guy. The simple reality is if you make less than $70,000 a year in the United States, your wages have actually gone down. Inflation is 2.9%, wage growth is 2.7%. And if you work by the hour instead of a salary, and I'm sure you're on a salary if you got a 401k, if you work out by the hour, your wages have actually gone down about 2%.
In the last year and a half?
Yeah.
Well, all I know is I feel like I have more buying power. But, you know, the other thing...
I don't know why that would be. You're seeing prices, you know, inflation's almost 3% right now. I think that you're mistaking the stock. You're making a fundamental error here, James, and that is thinking that the stock market is the economy. The stock market is one of many indicators of the economy. I think the most important one is wage growth. And we haven't seen substantial wage growth since Reagan's first tax cuts.
Well, maybe I need to look more into, I'm not an economist, obviously, but I need to look more into that. The other thing, and I'll let this go because you're going to call me a racist and everything after that, but every single time I turn on your station, because I try to balance it out, I listen to you and MSNBC and Fox and the others from all spectrums trying to divide like who, I don't know, where we're really at. And it's so hard with where news is to actually find out just what's happening without the spin.
Sure.
And the thing is, every single time I turn on Progressive, every single time, I can count within the first minute somebody brings up race. Like that dude just talking about, oh, they can find us for the draft, but they can't find us to vote. Well, if you're an adult, you want to go vote, go sign up as a registrar and vote. I don't know why that's a racist thing.
You've got about 25% of America who every single day when they wake up and walk out of the house have to be concerned about somebody hurting them, killing them, diminishing their job opportunities, arresting them, shooting them, simply because of the color of their skin. And I get it. You know, you and I are white guys, and we don't wake up worrying about how the color of our skin is going to influence our day. It's something we don't think about pretty much ever, unless, you know, something's right in front of us that forces us to think about it, and that makes us uncomfortable. I get that, James, but don't you think that if a quarter of the country, and it's probably actually a little larger number than that, if a quarter of the country is living in fear of just the normal cycles and pulses of life in America, that we all have an obligation to do something about that?
Well, of course, absolutely.
Then shouldn't we be talking about race?
And other big cities, but I'm talking about voting. Are they saying they can't leave their host to go vote because they're afraid it's like Baghdad? They're going to get shot down in the street because they're voting?
Well, no, but they're going to get banned. I mean, you've got the one of the most black counties in Georgia right now has 9 polling places, and the Secretary of State of Georgia, who is running for governor against Stacey Abrams, she's black, he's white. He's running against her. He has proposed shutting down 7 of the 9 polling places in this very rural, very black county in Georgia, so that many of the people, in order to vote, are going to have to travel 20, 30 miles. And this is a county that has the lowest rate of car ownership in the state, or one of the lowest rates in the state.
Well, that should be flat out illegal if that's happening.
I agree, and this is the stuff, you know, when people are talking about race on this program, typically it's in the context of actual real stuff like that.
Well, in that case, I mean, in that case specifically, the state ought to come in and say, whatever Supreme Court or whatever, and say, no, you have to have a certain number of polling places per 1,000 people per district.
I agree.
Or whatever.
I agree, but the state Supreme Court is not doing that. See, under the Voting Rights Act, any state that had a history of Jim Crow laws, like, you know, this kind of thing, you know, where they just make it hard for people of color to vote, black people to vote, had to clear with the federal government any changes like shutting down polling places. They had to pass that through the Department of Justice before they could do it and prove that it wasn't being done for racial purposes. Now that the Supreme Court has blown, no, the Supreme Court blew that up. You know, 4 or 5 years ago, the Supreme Court said, it said, and this just kind of blew my mind, we no longer have a problem in the United States of people not being allowed to vote because of their race. And so, therefore, we no longer have to enforce the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And immediately, I mean, literally the same day that decision came down, 3 states, Texas, I believe it was North Carolina, and the other one was somewhere in the Midwest, it might have been Wisconsin, announced that they were going to draconian voter ID measures, and they were going to review all of the polling places and dial back the number of polling places in areas where people of color vote. I mean, it's just, it is so transparent. It is so obvious. Democrats talk about it, and Republicans go, oh, you're talking about race again. Yeah, this is wrong.
Well, yeah, a case like that, absolutely, where there's
this is the Republican Party's principal strategy to win elections, James, is to disenfranchise people who want to vote. I mean, you've got.
Well, I got to tell you, like I said with Trump, you know, I'm not a huge fan. Like I said, I voted for Hillary. I was throwing up my mouth, but at the same time, I just couldn't stand that. You know, I guess I'm more libertarian, or so. I wish we had a third damn option because I'm not left. I believe in gun rights. I think abortion. I mean, you ever hear a 7-month baby's heartbeat on a monitor? I have, because I have 4 of them. I believe in. I hate these assholes that kneel for the flag.
Yeah, I'm sorry, James. I got to stop you right there. You can't use that kind of language on the air. I'm sorry. You know, and yeah, so you hate people who are kneeling for the flag. But apropos of the voting, James, if you're still listening on your radio. And my apologies to any of our listeners who might have, I think we bleeped that out. Thank you, that obscenity. But this is the basically the founder or co-founder of the Heritage Foundation and a number of the other right-wing think tanks. He was helping to run the Reagan campaign in 1980 when he said this to a group of Republican Christian activists in the basement of a church in Texas. A couple of hundred Republican activists who were all very active in Christianity. This is Paul Weyrich.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome.
Here, we'll start it over again. Hang on just a second here. Okay. I don't have you. Oh, you don't have it? Okay, I'll do it some other time. Paul Weyrich just basically came right out and said, you know, I don't want everybody to vote. Quite candidly, our voting, our leverage in the elections goes up as the voting populace goes down. It was just that simple. Daryl in Kearney, Nebraska. Hey, Daryl, what's on your mind today?
It's Dale, Tom.
Oh, Dale, I'm sorry. What's up?
Oh, that's fine. Hey, I don't know how you do it, quite honestly. But,
well, step by step.
Issues. One, huh?
Step by step, caller by caller.
Yeah, several issues, though, to address the issue of, well, the caller that just called about kneeling.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my only brother in the military in Germany, and I have very vivid memory of the gentleman kneeling to hand me his flag.
Wow.
So they can think about that.
Yeah.
And also the gentleman that called in about the stock market. I'm a 34 veteran of the market, and I would suggest you might try to get Nomi Prinz on.
Oh, yeah, we've talked to her a number of times.
Brilliant, brilliant lady.
She really is, yeah.
They think that the rise of the stock market is an indicator of the economy, and you're totally right. It's not. And it's simply been rising because the Federal Reserve printing money called quantitative easing. They've channeled all that to the top 5 or 6 investment banks, which have turned around, instead of trickling it down to everybody, they've used it to buy back their stock. And so that's what's happened. Is that's been the
well. It's not just those banks. The other big stock, over $1 trillion of stock buybacks are going to happen this year. We're on course for $1 trillion, and most of that is the $1.5 trillion tax cut that took effect this year.
Absolutely, and then also with all the trillions that's floating around out there, instead of making the people that got the money pay it back, this is why they've imposed sequestration and austerity on the working people around the world.
Yep,
but,
I agree.
Anyway, I just wanted to make that point and support you, Tom. You're doing a great job.
Thanks a lot, Dale. I appreciate it, and thank you for the call, and thanks for watching us there in Nebraska. What a day, huh? We got some fantastic callers in all directions. Kenneth in Seattle, you want to get back to the discussion of impeachment?
Yes. Here's my reason why we should discuss it. And my answer to the usual objection. The usual objection is Congress won't do anything because it's all Republican. And I brought this up to a friendly acquaintance, and he was dismissive, utterly dismissive. And the reason I brought it up is that Trump had just announced that he was canceling the treaty to Iran. As I understand it, canceling a treaty is violating a treaty.
That's correct.
And a treaty, as I understand it, is second only to the Constitution in being the law of the land. So that's already an impeachable offense.
Treaties are actually above the Constitution. If we signed a treaty, that abrogated First Amendment free speech rights, that would become the law of the land.
Okay, I stand corrected. Okay, so it's impeachable already, right there, along with all the other things. Now, I mentioned this to a friend. He was utterly dismissive, disdainful, dismissive. Mm-hmm. Nobody cares. Congress is not going to do anything. What he was overlooking, and what other people overlook, is that we don't just have to be reactive to that fact. There's a matter of long-term response. There's a matter of building momentum. There's a matter of eventually shaming the Republicans, bring into it the effect of worldwide opinion, showing the Republicans to be not very short of being a gangster operation. Yeah. And it takes time to do that. So yes, we should talk it. We'll fail to actually bring it about, but there's this long-term effect. There's no sense in throwing in the towel and giving up because of an immediate reaction. There's a matter of long-term response, and we can help develop it. So yeah, we should talk it up.
Amen. Okay, Kenneth, thank you. Your vote is recorded, and good on you. Bill in Richmond, Virginia. Hey, Bill, what's up? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. Bill in Richmond, you're on the air.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Tom. I'm sorry. I turned the phone upside down.
It's all good.
Listen, I want to ask this question about Denmark, because there was an article in a Richmond paper yesterday by one of the economists at UVA. And I keep hearing this combination about Denmark and Scandinavia.
Right.
And you can go through by the numbers and take a look that beside the obvious size that Denmark is 6 million people, we're 327 million people, 85% of the population is fairly homogenous. They're Danish. That certainly isn't the case here.
No, 75% of our population is.
Pardon me?
I think 74% of our population is white.
Well, no, it's not saying white. That's not what they're saying. In Denmark, they're Danish. They were native Danes.
Yeah.
In this country, name somebody that you certainly couldn't come up with that figure.
So you're suggesting that our nation, that we should do like Israel did and just say, you're only really a citizen of this country if your genes look like this?
That's not what the article was, because this was written by an economist. But this is what caught my attention. The marginal tax rate in Denmark hits the middle class harder than it does here.
Yeah, I know. And do you know what the minimum wage is in Copenhagen for what McDonald's pays?
No, I don't.
I believe it's $24 an hour, and the reason why is because about half of that is going to taxes. But in exchange for that, and this is the point. I keep making this point, and people seem not to understand it. If you look at the history of taxation in the United States, every time we've cut taxes on working people, wages go down. Every time we've raised taxes on working people, wages go up. And the classic example of this is Denmark, where you can pay, if you're making around $40,000, $50,000 a year, you're paying about 43% in taxes. Almost half of your income is going to taxes. But you're making twice as much in pay. I'm sorry, Bill, we're out of time. But well, actually, try it. We got 10 seconds. Go for it, quick. Bill? No, Bill. Okay, Bill hung up. Anyhow, we'll continue the conversation after the break. It's 48 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Oh my, there's a bunch of stuff in the news here today that I just wanted to hop on here. Business looks to Kavanaugh to extend Supreme Court hot streak. This is something that should concern all of us. Alexandria Glorioso, writing over at Politico, she says, you know, abortion rights and civil liberties have so far dominated the fight over Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court, because, you know, we all know he's going to make abortion illegal, or allow the states to make abortion illegal, and civil liberties. You know, he's ruled against people on a number of occasions, and ruled in favor of things like torture and the having the government crash into your house and you know, threaten you and search you and all kinds of other stuff. But the business part of it is being largely ignored. And Alexander writes, industry groups led by the Chamber of Commerce have spent decades bringing lawsuits and filing briefs to the top court, the Supreme Court, in hopes of reining in regulatory power and winning favorable rulings for business. And court watchers believe Kavanaugh, who was recommended to Donald Trump by the Conservative Federalist Society and worked in the pro-business Bush administration, would help industry continue its hot streak at the court. And then they point out this has been the most business-friendly court in the history of the Supreme Court. So some pretty strange stuff there. Andy, watching Free Speech TV in Fort Worth, Texas. Andy, what's on your mind today?
I'd just like to point out that that people of color in this country, excuse me, pushed the wrong button.
Yeah, you're on, Andy. I'm listening.
People of color are treated better in this country than they are in their own countries by white people in this country. And that's why they're all coming here, because they're treated better by white people in this country than they are by their own people in their own land.
How did you learn that, Andy? What countries have you visited?
Well, Mexico for one, Iran for another. I don't have to visit a country to know how they're treating each other in Nigeria or.
You've been to Iran?
Yes, I have.
And
I went with Bell Helicopter to Iran in 1973.
Okay, and
when the Shah of Iran was mistreating those people a whole lot more worse than they're being mistreated by their own people today.
Right, the Shah of Iran was a white guy.
Huh?
The Shah of Iran was a white guy.
Well, they're all white people. Those are Aryans.
Well,
they're Iranian.
Okay, they're Persians. You know,
yeah,
Andy,
they're Persian, but.
Andy, you know, so there are countries where the citizens are treated poorly. What does that have to do with what kind of country we want to live in?
Oh, it has everything to do because we.
Are you saying put up? Do I hear Andy saying to people of color in the United States, just you put up with my racism because I'm not as bad as you know, the guy running?
As you are to your own people. Who's mistreating all the people in Chicago on the South Side? Not white people.
Yeah, I would say it's the police, Andy.
It's the police. They're not the ones that's killing each other.
It's the police. Andy, I'm sorry. Your racism is just a little too raw for me. I just, you know, I've hit my vomit threshold, and so I'm just not going to continue. I'm going to go back to Brett Kavanaugh. Actually, I'm not. We're out of time. We'll be back with more of your calls right after this. Stick around. Thank you so much for watching the Thom Hartmann Program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much. In Los Angeles. Hey, Albert, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. I just want to talk about democratic socialism.
Sure.
And maybe give a better definition. Basically, democratic socialism is just the democratization of resources. And when we talk about the economy, we need to start talking about it instead of dollars and cents in terms of resources. You do a good job explaining things, but for some reason it doesn't seem to be sitting in with a lot of the listeners, especially what inelasticity is. And basically, and you described that pretty well, but for some reason it's not sitting in. Inelasticity is simply saying, anything that we need, regardless of the price, we should band together and try to come up with some type of economies of scale to take advantage of that, because the average cost per person will go down. It's almost similar to what you were talking about with the profit motive. Yeah. Things that we need should not have a profit motive in front of that, because it's only going to drive up the cost. And if we want to lower the cost on something that we need, the obvious way to do it is to not have somebody, quote unquote, capitalize off of that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And this, for example, I've been seeing these CenturyLink commercials on TV where they go, you can get the same price for the rest of your life for your internet service. And I'm like, wait a minute, shouldn't internet service prices be going down? I mean, basically everything that's tech, the price goes down. Over time, you get economies of scale, you get, improvements, better algorithms, better codecs, all this kind of stuff. The price should go down. Why would I want to lock in my price for life? So, yeah, excellent point. Mark in San Francisco. Hey, Mark, thanks for listening to AM 910. We just have about 20 seconds here. You got a quick one?
Yeah, income inequality.
Oh, no, wait a minute. I got a minute and a half. I'm sorry. Go ahead. 30 seconds.
Income inequality, that's the big issue. And this tax cut, we can really point it out as welfare for the 1% corporations.
It really is. It really is. And the question is, to what extent do Trump voters understand that?
Well, we went trillions of dollars in debt to give the 1% corporations this tax cut. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with you. Mark, thanks a lot for listening to AM 910, our new affiliate in San Francisco, Clear Channel station there. Great to have you with us. And John and everybody else on hold, my apologies. We'll pick up your calls tomorrow. What a fascinating day. I haven't heard about the Manafort jury. In fact, apparently they're still deliberating. I'm wondering if there's a Trumpster on that jury who has been watching Fox News and is going, this is just an attempt to take down Trump. That's what's going on here. I'm not going to put up with it. And we're going to end up with a hung jury. If so, Fox notches another one in their belt. Amazing. Anyhow, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your
Thank you so
World
much for
in
watching
2
the
minutes.
Thom Hartmann program, our program here on Free Speech TV. We really appreciate it. The main way that we support our program, that all of us who work here get our paychecks and that we keep the lights on and whatnot here. Free Speech TV does that by asking you to donate, a couple times a year, and that keeps Free Speech TV alive. We keep our show alive principally, mostly, by advertising. We have advertisers who, pay the bills. They support the program. And we've told you about some of them in the past, but really want to just move all that onto the internet. So if you would like to support our program by supporting our underwriters, our advertisers, you can go to thomhartmann.com. There's a complete list of them, or there will be soon, and just click on their little ads and find out what they have and be there for them and for us. Thank you so much.